Okay, it's 10:03 on my side. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from various locations. And welcome to our panel session for today, looking at CLEA's third frontier in building effective national evaluation systems towards a focus on sectoral ECD interventions. I will just give it 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to settle down, and then we'll officially start the proceedings. All right, everyone, it's 5 minutes into the session on my watch, and I think we can get this panel session started. I am Ayabulela Dlakavu from Clear Anglophone Africa, and I am with the team I work with at the National Evaluation Systems Unit of Clear Anglophone Africa. And by way of introductions, we are basically looking at CLEA's third frontier in building effective national evaluation systems, pivoting towards a focus on sectoral evaluation capacity development interventions. So basically, we try to sort of tell a story of Clear Anglophone Africa's evolution in terms of its evaluation capacity building and evaluation capacity development interventions in Anglophone Africa, as well as sometimes Francophone Africa in the region, just to try and fit into Glocal's theme on Eval Evolve and looking at innovative M&D approaches. So that is the theme of our presentation as a center, and I'll just give you a rundown of the presentation or the panel session presentation. We'll begin with Dr. Takunda Chirao, Deputy Director of Clear Anglophone Africa, who will be reflecting on the first phase of Clear AA. This was basically the beginning of Clear AA as an ECD institution, and what the nature of its work was for those first 5 to 8 years of its birth. And then we'll move on to looking at phase 2, the transition of Clear AA to phase 2, looking at its work on systemic-wide M&D interventions, looking at the entire M&D ecosystem and trying to make inroads and build M&D systems that are widely inclusive and that are effective in sort of inducing better development outcomes and better lives for people across the continent. And then phase 3, we'll have Ms. Lebohang Moloi and Mr. Maibongo Mncube, who will be looking at how CLEA is pivoting towards a third phase in its ECD interventions, looking at innovation, as well as looking towards sectoral ECD interventions which are more sustainable. So that is the rundown of our panel session today, colleagues. And then towards the end, we'll then open up the session to a question and answer session where you can sort of provide your own inputs, your own insights, as well as maybe even recommendations for what CLEA can do in terms of its new approach or third phase of evaluation capacity development. So without wasting further time, I think we can get into the presentations, and I will give you over to Dr. Takunda Chirao.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aya, and thanks to everyone who has tuned in this morning. Let me just start by saying that ClearAA as a center was established in 2011 at the University of Witwatersrand. And the mandate really for the center was to capacitate or build M&E systems, evaluation systems geared towards making sure that governments are able to use evidence, and that evidence will be able to change the trajectory towards development outcomes in the countries that we're working in then. So since that time, we've done wonderful work with central ministries or departments that have got oversight and coordination mandate of public sector monitoring and evaluation. And the work really was mainly focusing on training government ministries, departments, and the agencies on issues to do with monitoring, on issues to do with evaluation. And I must say that during that time, mainly trainings were a focus area that ClearAA was looking at. And we could not really say that these trainings were not important, but we did not really have a thinking towards a systems perspective on how we could strengthen or build different elements of the system. So the overall approach to strengthening M&E was not really, strategic nor systematic, and we did not produce long-term results or system-wide impact. And that gave us some time to have some internal introspection to look at the way we were providing capacity building, capacity strengthening in the countries we're working in. And there was also an internal evaluation that was done. So from around 2017, there was a push towards systems thinking and how we could strengthen different elements of the system. And in 2018, we started now looking at different aspects of how we could try to make sure that different elements of the system could be capacitated, could be strengthened. And at that time, we did some capacity needs assessment at individual and institutional levels to understand what is the state of M&E in terms of capacities at individual level, then in terms of M&E infrastructure that is developed within organizations or institutions. For instance, we did some work with the city of Johannesburg here in South Africa. We did some M&E diagnostics, which were focusing on 12 functions of the national evaluation system. The reports were produced and validated. That happened in Rwanda, Kenya, Zambia, Ghana, and Uganda. And there was some RBME training in the city of Johannesburg, City Power, and Department of Social Development. And during that time also, it was emphasized that after providing some training, it is key now to provide technical assistance. And we're providing some technical assistance at the Gauteng Premier. So when then we realized that it's not, the diagnostics were not going far, and it did not include some M&E capacity strengthening strategies and plans, we later decided that once we do diagnostics, we need to come up with an intentional document, which we termed monitoring and evaluation capacity strengthening strategy and plan, which has got different projects that needs to be implemented, say in a country, for a country to improve its performance and also provide better service delivery. And that document would provide who is responsible for implementing such a project, what are some of the results that needs to be achieved, and also what is the budget that needs to be achieved. So I've just given a brief background of how the center has evolved from just individual kind of trainings to a systems thinking towards strengthening different elements of the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chirao, for that extensive overview of phase one of CLA's work. So I'll just jump in now and give an overview of CLA's systems approach to evaluation capacity development as necessitated and codified in its regionalization strategy of 2019 when the center adopted this strategy. And quite frankly, that particular regionalization strategy speaks to the need for the center to focus on a systemic approach to evaluation capacity development, emphasizing engagement with different yet intersecting parts of the overall M&E ecosystem. And basically, that regionalization strategy essentially conceptualizes a national evaluation system, a national M&E system, as being constituted by parliaments who are but one integral part of a country M&E system. Higher education institutions are also seen as an important leg of a national evaluation system because those are institutions who essentially develop a cadre of evaluators, a cadre of the entire evaluation value chain, from commissioners of evaluations to undertakers of evaluations. And then the regionalization strategy also speaks to the need to sort of intervene and also provide technical assistance, technical M&E assistance to voluntary organizations for professional evaluation, as essentially the communities of practice who convene evaluators and other people who are engaged in evaluation work into one community of practice. And so it is vital for CLA to sort of provide technical assistance to VOPs as one of the key stakeholders in a country M&E ecosystem. Another recognition is that of engaging development partners in evaluation capacity development, because without development partners, we understand that we wouldn't be having a system-wide lens of an M&E ecosystem, simply because development partners have proven to be quite key allies in sort of supporting evaluation capacity development. And then we also look at civil society organizations as well, because those are other development partners or allies or developmental work working side by side with governments. So in essence, phase two is essentially an organic evolution brought about by an acute recognition by the center of the interconnected and interdependent nature of country M&E ecosystems. Because if we were to isolate and say we are just going to focus on one leg of a country M&E ecosystem, we realize that we won't be building sustainable M&E ecosystems, because all those parts actually work together for the greater good, which is to sort of induce better development outcomes. So the regionalization strategy essentially speaks to this need of a system-wide approach when designing as well as implementing evaluation capacity development. So within that regionalization strategy, what we have is essentially CLA's vision, CLA's mission, as well as its theory of change, which then necessitates the center to adopt an ECD paradigm, which places M&E at the center of development planning, at the center of policy making, at the center of budgeting, and essentially at the center of praising the various development interventions, so that any country, any government, any civil society organization engaged in development work can actually keep track of its achievements, as well as to use evidence emerging from M&E activities to sort of improve their offerings, improve program design or policy design, or whichever development intervention a particular entity is engaged in. So the ultimate aim essentially is to establish M&E systems that enable better development outcomes. And with better development outcomes, we are of the informed assumption that better development outcomes then trickle down to an improved quality of life for various populations, which is the ultimate aim of development, as well as evaluation capacity development. So CLA country programs, evaluation capacity development country programs, are essentially holistic ECD interventions which seek to improve M&E capacities of all players in a national M&E ecosystem, without having any particular bias towards one over the other. So the approach is essentially one that can be best captured in Aristotle's phrase, which essentially says that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So we believe in actually intervening across the value chain of an M&E ecosystem so that we have sustainable M&E ecosystems that work together to produce better development results. And examples of some of these ecosystem-wide evaluation capacity development interventions we've engaged in, we have a Uganda M&E Uganda evaluation capacity development country program, where we cut across various stakeholders in Uganda's M&E system. Likewise, in Tanzania, we have that holistic approach to our evaluation capacity development work that we have sort of adopted. And just to mention, colleagues, that our ECD country programs, holistic ECD country programs, are actually co-created by the governments and other M&E ecosystem stakeholders who are engaged in the M&E ecosystem. So CLEA doesn't go in with a mindset of going to design something that is not necessarily, that does not have the consensus of country partners. So all of our country programs are country owned, are country led, and that is the approach and principle we have taken across all our country programs in Anglophone Africa. And Malawi is also part of this, Liberia is also part of this, to name but a few countries. Another thing we've realized as a center is that ECD interventions or country M&E capacity strengthening programs require forming ECD partnerships. And the whole idea there is that the ECD economy is one where we have various institutions instituting various ECD interventions. And what we have come to realize is that instead of us engaging in somewhat of a scramble for evaluation capacity development programs, we've decided to form partnerships so that we try and engage in harmonization of various ECD interventions with various partners or various other entities who work in the same space as we do. And such ECD partnerships we've formed include the program cooperation agreement we have with UNICEF ISARO, which is currently going through its second phase. We had a first phase from 2020 to 2021. And now we are in the process of unleashing a second phase of that, where we do evaluation capacity development in countries such as Lesotho, where we are developing a draft monitoring and evaluation policy, working side by side with the UNICEF ISARO and the government of Lesotho. In Namibia, we have also co-created a draft M&E policy. In Botswana, we are busy with the draft national evaluation plan. And all these M&E frameworks are essentially meant to sort of create an enabling environment so that we create evaluative cultures in these public sectors. And the results of those particular interventions will probably bear fruit in the medium to long term after they have been adopted by the respective governments and maybe even the legislatures who might need to approve those M&E frameworks. And then we also have a long-term agreement with the World Food Programme, which is focused on M&E training, research, and a flagship emerging evaluator program where we are blooding a cadre of evaluators for the future and even the present. And that particular emerging evaluator program is bearing fruits already, and we think it's something worthwhile keeping going because we are in the business of creating a supply of capable evaluators. So essentially, CLEA is now undertaking another transition into a third phase, which is necessitated by the dynamic international development and M&E context we experience. And Mr. Maibongo Mncube and Ms. Lewang Moloi will be taking you through this third phase of CLEA's evaluation capacity development work.
Good morning. For the third phase, it's more like what we aspire to do as an organization. So as we know, the world is changing and the demands that are happening on M&E are totally different from how we were doing business. It can no longer be business as usual. Things have changed. We need to find agile and much more progressive ways of doing evaluation. Do you mind moving to the next slide? I am. Like I've said, developmental aid has changed and it has evolved. So it has created more demands on M&E. The evaluations that we must work on now need to be responsive frequent, and agile. And we must also find innovative ways that are systematic so that they are bypassing on how we used to do business, so that we move away from linear progressive ways of doing work and slow feedback loops. We now need to have real-time, agile, frequent feedback loops that are innovative. And this, in turn, in my view, will increase accountability and transparency in the work that we do and the delivery of the work that we do. Evaluators, in my view, need to think outside the box. Well, thinking outside the box is no longer business. I think recreating the box is how we need to look at things, and even within the countries that we work within. And this also involves technological advances. My colleague, Maibongo, will carry on and give you clarity on the various aspects of what are the driving factors of innovative M&E. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So when we consider the drivers of innovation within the M&E space, I think it is very important that we also think about it within the broader context of responsible innovation and a broader understanding of the ethical, social, and political dimensions of such innovation. Like Aya mentioned, with regards to the Emerging Evaluator Program, for instance, that Clear AA is involved in. Those are some of basically the innovations that are now being taken at the level of capacity development to ensure that there is a specific and particular cadre of evaluators that is developed. So looking at, for instance, the fact that because of all that we've experienced, there is a new urgency with regards to how we approach evaluations. No single method, is actually enough. So we have to be creative in how we approach these evaluations. So that means we now have a new urgency to look at innovative ways, such as perhaps your Blue Marble evaluations that also put evaluators in a position where they also seek to become part of the solution to the bigger system, to the wider system issues. And then also another one of the drivers is the fact that we've taken a shift as an evaluative society from focusing on activities and how busy we are as organizations, but to actually focusing on the outcomes, to say we want to actually contribute to qualitative changes in the lives of people. We want to contribute to actual and real change. And so to that end, this has brought on, obviously, issues of accountability, to be able to say, what have you done with the resources and what are you able to produce with such resources? Not necessarily how busy were you and how many people attend events. So another key driver is the fact that M&E must be responsible, especially in this current period that we're facing with, for instance, the global, the COVID pandemic also, shook our system and the system as we know it to such an extent that we realize the urgency of having flexible, responsive, and agile systems. We had the introduction of rapid evaluations, but the idea is that we must be innovative in our thinking. We must always seek to find ways to ensure that M&E does not necessarily play a reflective or reactive role, but it can actually produce timely information that can be used in such a way as to even anticipate some challenges and deal with these issues before they actually become a crisis. Another driver is the boom of innovation and communication technology, which has also led led to the rise in big data, because with the boom of information technology, what we have is there are basically there's a lot of connectivity and more people having access to the internet, cell phones. And so with that, there's other new data that, there's other new data that we may not have even structured in terms of how we categorize data. And, it comes at a fast pace and the volume is very high. And we have yet to find new ways of saying, how do we use this data? How to use this data perhaps to enrich our M&E or to enrich our evaluations and our monitoring? So these are some of the questions that, we find ourselves having to grapple with. And also, there's the issue of also ensuring that we avoid cognitive, biases as a driver of innovation, where we acknowledge our own potential shortcomings as we are also dealing with all this data and all that, and we find new ways of actually giving credible evaluations. Yeah, please move on to the next slide. And so in all this innovation and in all these, with all these drivers that we've seen and we're experiencing, there've been some opportunities where we also could have even used more innovative solutions, or even taken technological advances and used them for the purposes of M&E. For instance, we have to explore the use of technology in responding to crisis, explore the use of technology such as drones in areas of crisis, conflict, and fragility. One of these cases could easily be, we could easily look into the application of such technologies with regards to drought and resilience interventions, especially where there are interventions being implemented in fragile states, where you actually monitor, you could make use of drones to monitor perhaps the progress with regards to whether it's in the context of farming, with regards to the progress being made. You can also monitor, you can also use drones to provide aid and also relief as well in such humanitarian contexts. But these are some of the areas in which our focus or our thinking should be directed, in the sense that the answers are not easily apparent when it comes to issues of innovation, but we have to be willing to explore these possibilities. And we have to be willing to explore, for instance, how drones could be used, perhaps how we could use drones and adapt them in such a way that they could provide maybe better ways of data collection in areas where it would not easily be feasible for humans to actually conduct that type of data collection, and or even ways of programming such programming data collection methods into these technologies, so that they can better assist us in these urgent times where we have to respond very fast. My colleague Lebo will speak to the next part. Thank you.
So with all these changes, we know that there are challenges that are bound to come when it comes to innovation, limited capacity. We still need warm bodies that we can train and make sure that they are efficient in delivering what's needed. We know issues of connectivity within this country. If you are using other networks that I won't mention here, it will be issues. We have issues of electricity. Is an ever-ending thing. It's a never-ending process that we've been facing in the country. Regulations and understanding what policies are there when it comes to aviation and drone usage. So we need to actually learn and relearn what is feasible, what is not feasible. We need to understand that there is probable misuse of these resources. We have seen how technology can be both positive and negative, and lead to outcomes that are both acceptable and unacceptable. We need to be prepared. We need to shift our logic and how we think of what's attainable. For example, we've realized that in the past few years since we've had COVID, we could have done things better when it comes to food parcels. Food parcels could have had, geographic systems that we could have used. Barcodes could have been used. Populated registers could have been used, and moving from paper-based. But reality is, if you are in KZN and there's floods, and you are supposed to be doing this work and monitoring what is supposed to be food parcels that are reaching the right people, how do we do that with all these challenges that we are facing? How do we make sure that we have the right people, the right food parcels reach the right people? And we teach the people that we're working with in those areas to deliver what's necessary, to use the technology that we have to use. So it isn't, we are aware, we're not blindsided by the challenges that every person faces, because they're all context-based and they're all faced in different ways. So we need to understand what the challenges are, but also be open to the growth, be open to the changes of how we do business, and rechange how we've been doing business. Because it's no longer, as I've said when I started this presentation, it's no longer business as usual. Thank you. I think my colleague Aya Bongo will go through the rest of the presentation. Aya Bulela.
I was busy speaking to myself. Thank you very much, Liv, and my Bongwe, for giving an insightful third phase, or our current transition into a third phase as a center, bearing in mind the wider systemic issues, both in the global economy as well as evolutions in the evaluation space itself. So essentially, colleagues, what we have given you in this session is essentially a story of how Clear Anglophone Africa has tried to adapt and change along with the times, responding both to issues of innovation, issues of humanitarian and emergency situations, as well as broader issues in the evaluation capacity development space. Because one of the things that us as a center need to always be cognizant of is that Clear Anglophone Africa exists in a particular geopolitical space where there are certain unravelings, and our M&E systems, the M&E systems we seek to build, need to be responsive to those broader macro environmental issues, so that they become resilient and they become useful. Because of most import to us is to build M&E systems that are of import to our partners, be it governments, be it civil society, be it parliaments. So that is the story we're trying to lay before the session today. And we now move towards the question and answer session. And we've basically just drafted 3 broad questions, hoping that you guys could give us maybe your insights as to how we could answer these questions as a center as we move to this new pivot of innovation, as well as moving towards sectoral work, because some of the broader issues the center's ECT offerings need to respond to, speak to the issue of state fragility, speak to the issues of gender and equity, issues of youth empowerment, because we're a continent that is somewhat bedeviled by intrastate instability brought about chiefly by this issue of youth discontent. So we seek to also build M&E systems that speak to or that are responsive to youth issues or issues facing the youth, so that they are not drawn into conflicts and the like. And also we are pivoting towards a third phase now, where we are seeking to also adapt to climate change or build M&E systems that are responsive and resilient, and that shine a spotlight on the need for countries to move towards climate change adaptation, as my colleagues mentioned in the third phase. So the questions we bring forward now are, firstly, what recommendations can you proffer for Clear AA in its third phase, looking to go into sectoral work. Number two, how can the challenges associated with innovative approaches to M&E be overcome, which were just presented? And thirdly, how realistic and attainable are these innovative ideas in your country context in particular? So thank you very much, colleagues. Those are the questions we have for you as we enter our plenary session, and we'll be looking both at the chat. I'm not sure, Talita, if people can raise questions in terms of audio, or they just need to drop it on the chat, and then we'll try and ventilate them and also seek answers from the panel as well. So colleagues, we are officially in the panel, in the question and answer session now. So please feel free to voice your opinions and insights. Thank you very much. Any opinions, colleagues? I think we'll just give it a minute, and then we'll see how we go forward. Lebu and Bongs, I think since we're experiencing a bit of silence, any suggestions as to how we could sort of go forward, mindful also of time?
I think your question that you've just raised is relevant. So it's literally just an interactive process where, you know, if there is anything that you can learn from us or we can learn from your context, we are very open to it. So it's supposed to be an interactive process. So we're happy for inputs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lebu. Bongs?
Yeah, no, maybe just to say while we're waiting perhaps for inputs and other ideas, just wanted to say, you know, just in thinking even about these innovations and basically what Clear AA is doing, I think the issue of Made in Africa evaluation and also Blue Marble evaluations and efforts to design evaluations in such a way as to be responsive to the broader challenges of climate change and SDGs. I think we need to spend more time looking at how our methods, in as much as we have these new evaluation approaches, but we need to spend more time looking at how these methods, how responsive they are, and maybe not necessarily to have these stringent ways or approaches that require this step-by-step thing, but also to be able to take and match certain principles in certain evaluations according to the context, to the broader understanding of the context. Yeah, no, that's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Lebu and Maibongwe. I think as a panel, we've sort of ventilated some of the issues we wanted to engage on in this particular session, and we would have loved to get inputs from colleagues on the floor. Sam Gelisiwe has had her hand up. Okay, Sam Gelisiwe, you can have a crack at it. Samge, I think you are on mute.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You are
Can you
loud
hear
and clear. Loud and clear,
Okay.
madam.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was just thinking, and actually it's a question. When you're thinking about digital innovations and technologies, and in the context of these sectoral ECPs, I wanted to find out whether the Center of Evaluation Systems is looking to advance digital innovation and transformation within specific sectors, because I suppose there are sectors already that are already have strategies regionally as well as in country that are looking at providing digital transformation. Specifically, I know in the agricultural sector, there are studies that look at, the level of infrastructure, digital penetration, policy and regulation, the business environment, capital, and agro innovation, and thinking about, how can these issues be addressed within the agricultural sector to boost food security and advance agro innovation. And so I think maybe those would be, in some cases, sectors that are more easier to penetrate, and understand, as well as, there are already strategic frameworks and platforms, digital platforms that are already like geospatial platforms that are already currently being used within the sector at different levels within government as well. And then is the center looking at specific sectors? How is the center looking at pushing these digital transformation or innovative ways of conducting M&E?
Thank you very much, Samke, for your question as well as insights. So essentially, if I were to take a first step at it, and Maibongwe and Sisleb will also chip in, and I see Taku is also back. This third phase that Clay is engaging in now, or it is pivoting towards now, I think it's still in its infancy. So I think with everything new, what we need to guard against is to sort of throw ourselves at, because innovation is something that is quite good, but it is a double-edged sword as well. Because if you just jump into a particular field without getting your bearings right, you might find yourself in a situation where, because some of the contexts we work in, we work with some countries who are agro-based economically, but also what we need to understand is that the context we are in Africa is such that if you look at the level of ICT use in those economies, you'll find that probably our context is still maybe in the third industrial revolution, not necessarily in the fourth. So while we are pivoting towards these innovative M&E approaches, we also need to blood in innovation and M&E in a way that is sort of considered. But I'll let Maibongwe and Sisleb also go in so that I don't abuse my privilege as a moderator of the session.
So thank you, Sam, for your question. For example, because I have a lot of experience when it comes to developmental work, the work that we have done in public health mainly is that, with HIV, for example, there is only one database. So if, for example, if Lebo tests positive in Soweto, you can only find her records in Soweto, which doesn't really make sense because Lebo can go to KZN and migrate to other areas. And there is no like a unique identifier for Lebo. So one of the things that could be done, but because we are stuck on our own ways and, change, as much as I is saying, it's hard and it has to happen with the receptiveness. The simplest way to actually see the loss to follow up when it comes to HIV cases is to use biometrics. You don't even need to have your ID, it's just biometrics. Shifting to that, it's hard. You know, COVID has even brought about the fact that even when you go into Monte Casino, you'd have to have biometrics to check everything, but that is not really happening. It's not attainable, it's not achievable. So as much as we want to shift, we do understand that there is, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. You know, there is progressive thinking, but there is also challenges that we are facing. And solutions are there, but we need to work hand in hand with the department that we work with so that they are receptive also. And we cannot be pushing too much because also you don't want to be seen like a bulldozing tactic. Maibongo, I don't know, what do you have to add? Thanks.
No, thank you so much, Lebo. I am very much covered by both your responses.
All right. Thank you very much, Sis Lebu, Maibong, and also Samke for your insights. These are essentially some of the questions we need to grapple with as we move forward. I'm not sure if anyone has spotted other hands on the chat, because from my side, I don't see any further inputs on the chat or any raised hands. So I think, colleagues, in the absence of any more engagements, we could sort of dissolve the session and wish everyone a good day further. And thank you very much to the panelists who have provided insightful presentations for today. And yeah, we'll keep the conversations going in other platforms as and when they come. Thank you very much, colleagues, and have a good day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.